Okay, I can't stop talking about this. I can't stop talking about this. But here's my thought. Okay. Shut up. Okay. Do we know how Katniss's mom and dad met in the first place? Do we know what brought them together in the first place? Have we been told that story yet? Because what if we're going to get that story? Because Katniss's mom was best friends with Maisie Donner. And, like, what if Haymitch was best friends with Katniss's dad? Oh my god. Or, like, what if he was friends with one of the other tributes? And so they... I swear to God. I actually swear to God. If that is what happens... If that is what happens... If that's what happens... If that is what happened... If that's what happened... Like, I know they knew each other and they, like, did business together and stuff, but, like, that is not necessarily enough to, like, form a close emotional bond with somebody on that level to the point that you would move to a different class willingly. Like, I'm going insane. I
am so glad that the Hunger Games is once again coming back to get us out of like this mindless consuming era that we're in, where people just turn on like movies and TV shows and pick up a book and they just mindlessly consume it, like there's no actual thought put into like what they're reading, and like creators and authors aren't making something that needs to be analyzed, and a lot of the times the information will just be handed to you and things don't have a deeper meaning and there's like no symbolization of it all, you know. Like, I personally love to analyze what I'm reading, and like I feel like these days there's nothing that really can be like analyzed. Like, there's really nothing that you can be like, okay, like what is the deeper meaning behind this? Like, what does this symbol mean? And like when I watched the Hunger Games for the first time last year, which, like, yes, I was a lot late to the party. I didn't watch it or read it when I was a teen because, one, when I was a teen I was depressed. I mean, I still am, but I was really starting to get depressed, so I was reading John Green, and two, I just didn't think I would be able to like consume it in like the best way possible. So as an adult I got to like watch it with an adult eye, and it's just so crazy because a lot of like media now doesn't get the Hunger Games. They don't get, like, there are books out there that are like copying of the Hunger Games of, oh, this is like Hunger Games meet this, but they don't get the Hunger Games and how it's so much more than just children fighting. Like, that's not the point of the, I mean, you know, that's not the point of the book. It's so much more to the book than that, and a lot of media keeps missing that. They keep missing that point, and so it's like hard for me to read like certain books now, and it's like, oh, this is supposed to be like the Hunger Games, and I'm like sitting here and I'm like, I'm trying to analyze, I'm trying to, you know, really look through the text and really gain something from it, and there's nothing there. I don't think that all media like needs to be like, I actually do, I'm sorry, maybe that's like anti-intellectualism or whatever you want to call it, but, or I don't know, whatever TikTok, you know, words y'all love to use, it could be that. But personally for me, I think that media is fun when it's not mindless, when there's something behind it, when there's something that I can be like, okay, what is this meaning? One of my favorite books last year was If We Were Villains, and I loved it because I am a Shakespeare fan, so I got to pull out my Shakespeare books and really analyze the Shakespeare book and be like, okay, but what does this Shakespeare book mean to this book specifically? Like, how, like, okay, yeah, they're doing a play, but there's a deeper meaning as to why the author chose this play specifically. I love that. Okay, I loved analyzing it. I had so much fun annotating that book, bitch. I loved annotate. It was something I was taught in high school, so it's something I've always had with me, and that's why I love the Hunger Games, because I can annotate the fuck out of that. There's so much meaning throughout all of it, and the fact that Suzanne Collins said that she wouldn't write another Hunger Games book unless she had something to say, I'm ready to hear it. I'm ready to hear it. Tell me.
So a couple days ago, I made this video about how the ICC is a corrupt institution. TikTok took down the video. But just a few days ago, it was reported by The Guardian that the Israeli Mossad had actually threatened and pressured the former prosecutor of the ICC, Fatou Bensouda. It says here, the ex-Mossad chief Yossi Cohen pressured Fatou Bensouda, who was the former prosecutor of the ICC, to halt a probe into war crimes in the occupied Palestinian territories. ICC officials said Cohen used despicable tactics like stalking. Cohen allegedly told Bensouda, "You don't want to be getting into things that could compromise your security or that of your family." Israel reportedly waged a 9-year campaign against the ICC and Palestinian rights groups. Israel allegedly threatened, surveilled, and hacked the communications of ICC officials. So, America and Israel are two of a handful of countries that do not recognize the ICC. However, America played a major role in pushing Fatou Bensouda out of her role as the chief prosecutor of the ICC and replacing her with Karim Khan. See, what Fatou Bensouda was trying to do was that she was trying to not only go after Israel for its war crimes in the occupied Palestinian territories, but she was also going to charge the U.S. for their war crimes in Iraq and Afghanistan. Now, here's where it gets even more interesting. So in July 2002, America passes a bill called the Hague Invasion Act, okay? This allows the president to use any means necessary to invade The Hague, which includes invasion, air bombardment, blackmail, and even kidnapping if the ICC was to prosecute an American soldier, a U.S. personnel, a U.S. military service member for committing crimes. Do you understand how fucking crazy this is, okay? Why would America have so much power over an institution whose entire existence is supposed to be to uphold peace and prosperity in the world, right? Like their entire existence is to ensure the safety of civilians, to go after war criminals. Why would America, a genocidal fucking country, have the power to invade The Hague? So when Bensouda declared her intention to investigate both the U.S. and Taliban for crimes against humanity in Afghanistan, the following year, Washington placed the prosecutor under sanctions and revoked her U.S. visa. It says here, since replacing Bensouda in 2021, Khan has worked to soothe the nerves of the U.S. and its most violence-prone allies. The Jerusalem Post reported in June 2022 that there have been some signs of relief in Jerusalem as Khan had not issued a single public statement nor taken any single public action regarding Israel-Palestine in his first year as prosecutor. America literally has a bill where they can invade The Hague in the event that the ICC was to not only prosecute a U.S. personnel, but any of America's allies. So obviously, if the ICC goes after an Israeli like Benjamin Netanyahu, America can then go into The Hague, invade it using force, using weapons. And this is legal in America. But why would America have this much control over an institution whose entire existence is to uphold peace in the world, right? Like, America is a country that is built on the erasure of indigenous native peoples. Literally genocided millions of Native Americans and then took millions of Africans and enslaved them in America for 400 years and then dropped the atomic bomb and then went to war in Vietnam and killed millions of innocent people and committed more war crimes there, and then went to Iraq and Afghanistan and committed even more war crimes. Why is this the country that gets to have the power to invade an institution whose entire existence is supposed to be there to uphold peace?
That one person who said, "Go girl, give us nothing" to Dua Lipa literally might have changed the trajectory of her life. I'm not joking. I'm not kidding. Because you look at her now, like, and I'm not condoning y'all bullying people for no reason, but she said, "You will never say that. You will never fix your lips to say that shit to me ever again. Ever again." Like, she says, trust time after time after time. I will give you not only something, not only will I give you something, I will give you everything. I will give you everything 100% of the time. Because I feel like most people don't. I mean, like, people are mean on the internet all the time, and will like drag people or whatever. And you know what? She said, "Oh, okay, watch this." And good for her, good for her. I saw Dua Lipa in concert, like New Rules, when only like New Rules had come out. So I literally like saw her in concert for, I'm not even kidding, like $15. Dua Lipa was like 15 feet away from me. I'm not joking. And it was like a small venue, so yeah, she couldn't be doing all that, all those dances and things. So I thought it was great. I had a fun time. She sounded really good. But yeah, they just changed. I just saw a video of her performing Houdini. I think on tour maybe. Yeah, she ate. Like, you'll never say that shit to me ever again. She said, if you fix your lips to say that shit to me, I'm gonna make sure that you're wrong. Ooh, cleared. Sorry. Every day I thank the stars that people on the internet, people on TikTok, people on Twitter are not casting directors. Because they're like, oh, new Hunger Games movie just dropped. And they're like, guys, here's who I think should play young Haymitch. And it's just like every blonde actor that's already very famous in Hollywood. No. Y'all know 3 actors on loop. I'm serious. They're like, this is who should play it. It's just the Netflix roster of boys. I'm not kidding. I hope they pluck a rando off the street and give him the role. I'm really serious. I think it works out so well. I'm sorry. I'm sick of seeing the same 3 people in every movie. I really am. It's like, yes, they do great. Like, they're gonna do a great job, but someone else might also. And plus, like, think of the impact that casting a rando has had. Tom Holland was a rando, basically, when they made him Spider-Man. Like, I personally enjoy when it's a big project and they just pick people that you don't know. Because I also think you run into the, like, I don't know, if it's Austin Butler in the Hunger Games prequel, girl, I'm gonna be like, Austin Butler, what are you doing here? Not, this is Haymitch Abernathy. You know what I mean? And I feel like people, like, he's supposed to be like 16. Like, they're all under 18-year-old people. Like, y'all don't know anybody. And there were all people who were like at least 26, I'm pretty sure. And like, not that those people can never play teenagers, because they do often, but girl, let's be serious.
And I want to encourage y'all to have the confidence to have the conversation about men's issues without waiting for women to have conversation about women's issues first and then interjecting. Y'all's struggles deserve their own conversations and their own spotlights. And I mean this so unironically. Like, I know there's a lot of quote unquote man bashing going around and everything, so y'all might not want to hear what a girl has to say, but I'm being so serious. Y'all have genuine issues happening, and you only bring them up when girls are talking about whatever we've got going on. Like how y'all are turning the whole would you rather be in the woods with a man or a bear thing into would you rather tell your feelings to a tree or a woman. Those are 2 separate issues. But the fact that y'all feel invalidated and unheard when it comes to sharing your emotions is a real problem. It's not just something y'all should bring up to like undercut a discussion on women's safety. And y'all do this all the time. Men's SA, men's DV, men's mental health are all real issues that y'all are struggling with. And yet all you ever hear is that no one wants to hear about them, but it's not that no one cares or just finds men completely invaluable. It's that you only bring them up to undercut other conversations. Instead of always starting more discourse and division by interjecting these issues as like a gotcha moment into other conversations, I encourage you all to take up the space to start these very valid conversations on your own. Those issues deserve a lot more airtime and a lot more quality airtime than what it gets. And a lot of that is, respectfully, y'all's fault. Y'all want to have a conversation about these issues? Great. Have one. People are willing to listen. If you think that people should only care about issues that directly impact them or issues that they are directly a part of, then we are cooked as a globe. Like, y'all's empathy cannot continuously start and stop with yourselves. You cannot consistently center yourselves in every single situation. And then when you find yourself in a situation where you can't be the center, just say it's not that deep, let it go. Like, whether we're arguing over AI art or not, I would be so embarrassed to comment this because it would show my personal lack of empathy. But that's me. Anyway, I might not be Palestinian, but I am pregnant. So this is Hala. She's 26 years old. And this is her husband. They recently got married, and up and before everything started, she was working to study medicine. Now she is 7 months pregnant and has hepatitis A from all of the pollution and unsanitary conditions in Gaza. As you can see, they are super close to reaching their goal, so they will be able to evacuate and have their baby in a safe, sanitary place and get Hala the access to the medical care that she needs. So I'm hoping we can just pack that up for them. You do not need to have direct ties to someone or to a situation to care. You do not need to be Palestinian or pregnant to support this family. You just have to have some empathy for them. This commenter probably will not do that, but you can, and you should. Men, who are the people that y'all keep saying you're supporting financially? Because it's not women. Every couple of days y'all come on here and talk about how financially draining women are and how women are like financially dependent on men as if this is the 1950s. It isn't, and that's not true anymore. Like, women, especially single women, own more houses than y'all do. We have more degrees than you do. In fact, in some US cities, despite the pay gap, we out earn you. And in fact, women are going out of their way to avoid dating y'all and having relationships with y'all, even if it comes at the cost of their own finances, because, you know, it's hard to live alone in this economy, plus the wage gap. But it doesn't matter. Women are doing it anyway. And that's because even in situations where we all make about the same, where we're doing that 50-50 split y'all claim y'all want so bad, we still end up doing more labor than you do. I mean, at least back in the day, women's job was to take care of the home. Now y'all expect us to take care of the home and go to work. So who is financially dependent on you? I mean, y'all making like $11.25 an hour at the gas station, no tea, no shade, but then come on here and talking about some we're financially dependent on you. Please. And all that aside, even if it were true, to this commenter's point, you still don't get to make mean, rude, hurtful, sexist jokes at someone's expense. Just because they're financially dependent on you doesn't give you the rights to be a jerk under the guise of a joke. That actually makes you abusive. Just letting you know that when we're talking about red flags. Pride Month starts tomorrow, and I want to remind y'all that queer Palestinians exist. Queer Sudanese people exist, queer Congolese people exist, and we need to continue to focus on them and amplify their voices in the face of this ongoing brutality as we celebrate the month away. They are human beings who love their homes and their communities and their families. They are not pawns for us to use in the whole should we help, should we not help, well, this country's homophobic, blah, 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 blah game. Not that. And as we always get caught up in the waves of rainbow capitalism, I want to remind y'all that there are still ongoing boycotts that we need to continuously apply pressure to so that we can continue to support all of the queer folks around the world. This includes anything from your vapes to your phones to McDonald's and Starbucks and all the way up to gold. Again, these are human beings, not pawns in a game, and these human beings have lives that are valuable and communities and homes and families worth saving, and we can't forget that as we celebrate the month away. So as always, don't forget, to offer everyone your love, care, and support, and happy Pride. Sometimes I think about what life looks like on a daily, regular basis in Palestine and Sudan and Congo, and what that stress must be like when it's not directly in our faces and on the news. Like, we're all tuned in when there's a flower massacre or a tent massacre or a raid on a refugee camp or a bombing, but what does the daily look like? The anxiety of not knowing when the next attack is, the fear of not knowing where your relatives are, what it must be like to look through the rubble and hope you find your loved ones and also not, what that endless hunger must feel like as they are all facing man-made famines where millions are at risk of starvation. Like, when the immediate, imminent threat of violence is over, how you maneuver all of the day-to-day things, all of the dirt and the grime and the sickness and disease that's everywhere, and the knowledge that if you get sick, there's no medical care, and if you're already sick, what do? What do those days look and feel like when they're not in our faces the way that we pay attention when there's an immediate larger crisis happening? It haunts me, and I hope it haunts you too, at least a little bit, at least enough to always remember that just because it's not in the news cycle today or in our faces today as much, that we still need to care and we still need to be doing our part and reposting and sharing and donating and all of the things every day, because every single day might not be, a flower massacre or a tent massacre, but there is hurt happening every single day. The people that y'all judge for getting pregnant and having babies out of wedlock are the same people that your parents and grandparents were. I'm sorry. The only major difference between this generation of folk and earlier generations of folk is that we are not essentially forced into marriages we do not want to be in. That is why a lot of y'all's parents got married at 18, 19, 20, 21 years old. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not saying at some point we shouldn't have evolved to start making smarter decisions or anything like that. What I am saying is that while y'all are judging folk for not doing it the right way, whatever that means, the only difference between now and then is that people, namely women, now have autonomy over their bodies and their lives in a way that they didn't before. It's why your grandma keeps telling you not to marry that man, not to settle down too young, because she loved that man and was having babies intentionally and deliberately over and over again. She might sing a different tune, but she doesn't, because she got married at 18, 19 years old, and somebody's birth certificate dates just aren't aligning with the time periods that you're thinking they should. Anyway, y'all can be as judgy as you want. Although my philosophy is if you're going to be judgy, make sure you're picking up a sign and protesting, or else we're all about to start looking really silly in a little while. I just wanted to remind y'all that while you're sitting up here on your high horse about how this generation is just so awful and terrible at family planning and blah, 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 remember that y'all are the offsprings of the Freaknik generation. Just remember that. Pregnant teenagers deserve our support too. It's a hot take, I know, but it's true. Like when I hear from teen parents, namely teen moms, they talk about like how lonely and isolated they were. Or like I hear all this discourse online that's like, oh, I wouldn't buy a gift for her, or I wouldn't attend a baby shower, or let my kid attend a baby shower if she even has one. And that's like not cool. I know we want to discourage teen pregnancy. I know we don't want to promote this as like positive behavior, but ostracizing these people, not the way to do it. All the time I get on here and hear grown adults talk about how hard it is to be pregnant, to have children, to raise them, how isolating it is, how sometimes they regret their kids. And these are grown adults with support networks who get things like baby showers and cards and some variation of praise. Walking this road as an adult is obviously hard enough. We do not need to deliberately make it harder for a teenager in an attempt to teach a lesson. If you all want to teach a lesson, we should educate. We should provide additional resources. We should do what we can, especially on the front end. By the time they're pregnant, it's a little late. Now it's just a punishment. Now it's just being mean. And never mind the damage that has on the kid involved. Y'all are so busy trying to make their life or her life miserable because of the choices that she made that her kid suffers by proxy, because it takes a village to raise a child and there is none because we isolated that person. Who benefits? So it might be controversial, but teen parents are absolutely worthy of our support, because it takes a village to raise a child, and we should not isolate our most vulnerable and our most in need because they didn't do it in the way we could appreciate. That's actually really messed up when you think about it. Oftentimes y'all see responsibility for men when it comes to children as nothing more than like financial obligations. And you're right, back in the day, men did get married. They were like, yeah, we're having a kid. And they settled down, got married, and went to work and brought in money for the home. Yes. But the strain that they put on their families, often psychological, emotional, sometimes even physical, literally inspired second wave feminism. And second wave feminism was the whole movement where women were like, hey, we want jobs, we want equal pay, we want to be able to get a divorce, we want to be able to leave the house, we want to have control over our own bodies. And those aren't rights you push for when things are hunky-dory at home and the system is working the way it's supposed to. Yes, back in the day, men took accountability and responsibility by getting married. But I kid you not, that paycheck and that ring is the beginning and end of it. It's why they continue to have extramarital affairs and have even more kids. It's why abuse was so frequent. It's why, generally speaking, fathers were oftentimes really disengaged. As opposed to modern day dads, which are statistically more engaged, they go to more events, they have more conversations with their children. More dads now have changed a diaper than back in the 80s. We talk all the time these days about how men still don't pull their weight in these relationships and in these households and in these families because they don't. But they're still doing more now, or even about the same that they did back then. Because this whole, oh, men were responsible, and at least we taught fathers to be responsible. We didn't then, and we don't now. And y'all have got to start looking beyond a paycheck now that women can do things like open bank accounts. Pride is about liberation. Yes, the celebration aspect is important because celebration and joy are important. Being seen is important. These are all acts of resistance. But pride is about liberation. And I know we all know this on some level because we all like know the saying and have seen the merch and the shirts. The first Pride was a riot, which is absolutely true. But I think we need a reminder because I'm worried we're getting caught up in like the celebration aspect and forgetting how much liberation work needs to be done. I'm all about the celebratory part of Pride, going to parades, being as flamboyant as you want to be, wearing tons of glitter and shaking your little tail feather. All of it's great, but it needs to come with the liberation work. Which means if you're not fighting for the liberation of and then you need to start, because those people matter and your queer siblings matter. It means if you're not advocating for reproductive justice, then you need to, because if you think it's not going to impact you now, it absolutely might later. And even still, it's impacting your queer siblings now. It means that y'all need to put down the Black sense and your inner Black woman and start advocating for actual Black women, especially Black trans women, who continue to be the most marginalized in our society despite doing the most for us. So go to Pride, celebrate, use biodegradable glitter, and shake your little tail feather. But remember that the work is not done. Abroad, we're here. And let that be the focus of our movements and our energy and our time. Everything we've learned about in the last year is new. Not the multiple genocides, not the ongoing infrastructure crisis in the United States, not the climate crisis. None of it is new. It might be new to us, but it's not new news, which means that every single politician knew about it, and voting in the fall isn't going to be enough to change it. Now, let me be clear. You still need to vote in the fall. Voting is a part of this, especially voting for your state and local officials. That is pivotal. However, as we do this whole, should we vote for this old guy or that old guy, or this side or that side? Both sides knew, had multiple chances, years, decades, multiple administrations even, and did nothing about it. We might have learned about what's happening on October 7th and afterwards, but it has been happening for 76 years. It's not new information. What's happening and have been happening for at least 30 to 40 years. From the climate crisis to codifying Roe v. Wade to tossing a few bucks towards, healthcare or clean water access, they have done nothing. We might be new to this, but they are not. So I want y'all to remember that while voting is an important step, it is not the only step, because if it was, we'd be done by now. Every single time I see a post that's like, oh, we need a child-free grocery store, or we need child-free flights, or child-free train rides, or child-free restaurants, I want to claw my eyes out just a little bit. And it's not because I'm becoming a parent, it's because y'all are becoming insufferable. Y'all hate kids so much that your desire to be undisturbed is turning into a genuine prejudice. Y'all can live child-free lives. You cannot exist in a child-free world and carry around this disdain for some of the most marginalized people among us. I don't know when people start valuing their own comfort so much that they can't handle the tiniest bit of inconvenience that is literally having an interaction with a child, but I'm over it. There's such an amount of entitlement and privilege that comes with wanting the whole world to be this child-free space, as opposed to you taking the initiative to make a child-free space, as in like going to the grocery store when kids are in bed. Like, never mind that adults keep taking away spaces where children often spend time, like libraries and parks and malls. Just this idea that we are somehow entitled to a world where children don't exist, that we harbor such deep-rooted prejudice against children, especially when we were once children. I'm concerned that it's not starting to sicken some of y'all, because it's sickening me. What always gets me about this whole I shouldn't have to deal with other people's kids, why are they impacting me thing is, one, they're human beings, and human beings tend to impact each other. Anytime you've seen an adult have a meltdown in a store, it's the same concept, except kids are learning things like emotional regulation, something that a lot of y'all seem to lack. But two, and more importantly, who is saying you have to deal with these children? Who is putting the onus of taking care of them or interacting with them beyond the bare minimum on you? You see a kid crying at the grocery store, no one's coming up to you and saying, please hold my baby, please help me out. You're a grown adult. Move. Because y'all aren't going to do the nice thing, the it takes a village thing, where you go and check on the parents and the kids and see if there's anything you can do to offer support. No, you're not going to do that. Which means that, again, as an adult with emotional regulation and an understanding of the world, you decide what you do next. I have a high tolerance for kid noises. I grew up around kindergartners, so I can go on about my day. But if that's not you, then you relocate, you change your schedule, you put the headphones on, instead of acting like you're the sun, the moon, and all the stars and can't possibly be inconvenienced. And yes, some people need to be better parents, but in general, y'all got beef with people trying to teach emotional regulation to folks who are experiencing big emotions for the first time ever, and you have beef with the people experiencing them. And in all honesty, they're handling their big emotions about as well as y'all are handling y'all's big emotions at y'all's big ages. It just looks different. Because y'all are tantruming too, but instead of kicking and screaming and crying, you're talking about how much you hate kids and don't want them around. You're actually teetering on bigotry. They're just upset they didn't get a cookie. When I was young, I was that kid who was really mild-mannered and soft-spoken and never got in trouble and was always invited to the grown-up stuff because I was never causing a ruckus. And so I asked my mom the other day, because I'm expecting a child, how she managed such a thing, because like I don't want my kid crying and screaming in public for their sake or for mine. And she gave me some parenting tips, of course, but she also reminded me that at one point I was also a small child and did cry sometimes, namely when people put me down because I love to be held, which can be a little bit difficult in a grocery store. And it doesn't mean that she's a bad mom because I was having a hard day, because I was a literal child, the same way that the people you're seeing in public are literal human beings with children. Not every single tantrum that you see in public is the result of a parent not parenting. Sometimes it's that little kid missed their nap for some reason. Sometimes it's that they're hungry and can't figure out how to articulate it. Sometimes it is something small, like they are not allowed to get this toy that they really, really want, and they're having a hard time regulating those emotions. It doesn't mean that parent is a bad parent. It means that kid is figuring out how to be a person. You did it too at one point, no matter how good you were. And I promise that as a kid who was that good. So I beg of thee to put yourself back in your childhood shoes. Remember what it's like to have your heart broken for the first time, or what it feels like to be told no on something you really want. Amplify it by like 1,000, and then think about how exhausting it must be to put up with you. And then have some empathy for the people around you. Please do not call 911 on children, kids, minors, if they are not directly in harm's way or directly causing harm. Children, they're doing something you don't like, they're on your property, they're eating your fruit, they're doing blah blah blah. You find their adult and take it up with their adult. Please do not call 911 on children. I don't know if this person is white, but I see a lot of white people saying this, and I think it has something to do with like this privileged relationship that white folk have with the police. But let me tell you real quick, calling 911 on a child is a quick way to get them hurt. Yes, in a perfect world, maybe the police will just tell the kid to get off their property, give the parent a fine, and we all move on. But the world isn't perfect, and I kid y'all not, the amount of times y'all call the police on children puts them in danger. Your yard, your berries, your whatever it is not so important that it is risk endangering children. Please do not call the police on kids unless they are in danger or causing danger, because otherwise you need to talk to their parent. Y'all need to know your neighbors, if not by name, at least by face. Y'all need to stop cutting off perfectly healthy friendships under the guise of setting boundaries and start getting comfortable with giving and receiving help. Y'all need to go back to having small talk in grocery stores and building community, because building community and community care is the only thing that's going to save us. And I'm not exaggerating, as we are quickly entering into a militarized police state with a government that doesn't care about us and is letting our social safety nets fail while also attacking our current source of community, which is social media. The people that you know in real life are going to be critical to your success. Like if something happens to you or your family or your home, you want to make sure you know your neighbors so that if the police can't or don't help you, maybe your neighbors can. If you lose your job and have nowhere else to go, you don't want to be completely alone because you isolated yourself under the guise of setting boundaries. And we need to set real boundaries, but I'm talking about the people who will like cut off a friend because they don't text back in a timely manner, like we're not all grown. If you're struggling with food or clothing or need a ride somewhere, your community is your safety net when everything else fails. And we need to make sure that we are building communities that we can feed into and also be fed from. And I know we live in this age of hyper-individualism, but that is not going to serve you long term. It is barely serving you now. So bring some cookies to your neighbor, offer to help that friend move, donate some food to the food pantry, and help somebody pack their car with them groceries safely. Because what's on the horizon, we will not and cannot get through by ourselves. The same way that babies and toddlers are learning how to be people for the very first time, their parents are learning how to parent them, this new human being with likes and dislikes and different emotions and different temperaments, for the first time. And this is not an excuse for parents that don't parent, the ones that are like completely hands off or the ones who just say yes to everything in an attempt to make the issue go away. Both of those are bad. But the majority of parents are people trying to figure out how to best raise and support this other person who is literally figuring out emotions for the first time, which means that this parent is learning how to deal with that for the first time. And a part of that learning experience includes tantrums. It includes meltdowns, breakdowns even, where sometimes this kid just seems like they cannot and will not be consoled. In babies, there's literally a word for it. And sometimes that learning curve will interrupt your grocery store trip or your trip to a restaurant or your time at the park or whatever it may be. It doesn't mean that those kids and their parents deserve to be excommunicated from society until their kid becomes less of a nuisance. And it doesn't mean that those children are going unparented. It means that everybody involved in that situation is experiencing an intense learning moment, and it's not very pretty. Raising kids is already hard. Doing so with empathy and kindness is a moderately new thing, and we are watching that learning curve take place in real time. Because back in the day, when y'all are like, oh, kids didn't used to do that back in the day, you're absolutely right, they didn't. They start to tantrum in a store, and their parent takes them out back, maybe takes off that belt or that sandal or whatever, hits them a few times until they stop crying. We don't want to be those parents, so we're watching people try something new. Sometimes that learning experience isn't fun. But that kid you see having a meltdown in public isn't going unparented, and you got to stop judging those kids and those parents. Because if you've ever had a bad day and cried in public before, you know just a tiny little bit of what that feels like. If you, for some reason, can't figure out which side of an issue to be on, listen to the music each side puts out. If you listen to the music that have been putting out for the last 8 months, give or take, it is all about liberation. It's about freedom. It's about reclaiming their homeland and having peace and hearing children laugh and play for once. It's inspirational. It's telling them to hold on just a little bit longer, because someday they will have freedom and they will be able to exist in peace. If you listen to the music that has been putting out, it's like, we will crush the enemy, we will raise the earth and put like Disneylands on top of it. Like, it's something just absolutely ridiculous. In music, people consistently confess their aims, their goals, their emotions, whatever it is. And in this case, it is very clear who is the colonizer and who is not. Like, music consistently expresses people's values, and it's obvious here who values taking care of the land and taking care of community and being safe and taking care of sacred spaces, and who is more interested in capitalism and ownership and like this sense of self and being like the winner.
Is somebody gonna match my freak? Is somebody gonna match my freak? I don't need you to match my freak. I need you to read the book that I recommended to you. It's really as simple as that. I'm not asking for too much. Open your listening devices, right? And read the book that I told you to read. And then come back to me, right? There you go. You match my freak. That's all I need. There's going to be a new Hunger Games book. Hold up. I didn't even have time to like it. I didn't even have time to like the post. What the Look at the state of me. There are 3 nails on this hand and 5 nails on this hand. You would have thought that I chewed these off after I heard this news. I'm going to be the worst person that you know. The story lent itself to a deeper dive into the use of propaganda and the power of those who control the narrative. The question, real or not real, seems more pressing to me every day. I didn't even want more Hunger Games books. I didn't think I did. But now more than ever, that is a conversation we need to be having. Look at this, I couldn't wait. I couldn't wait. I woke up this morning and there was news there was going to be a new Hunger Games book. And then I ate my breakfast. And then after I ate my breakfast, I opened up my phone. Guess what I saw? Lionsgate confirmed it's going to be a film too. 2026. Give me time. Since when are we announcing book drops and movie drops in the same day? Since when are we doing that? I mean this when I say it. I did not want there to be any more Hunger Games books because I didn't personally see how we could do that without kind of leaning into this whole dystopian idea of us just wanting to see more Hunger Games. But the concept of making these prequels / spin-offs touch on ideas that were already touched in the original trilogy is really doing it for me. This next Hunger Games book is not just going to be about Haymitch's games. The original trilogy follows the same kind of structure that the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes does. Because in the first book, we get set up for the world that kind of then goes into the games, that then goes into Catching Fire, more games, and then comes down into the aftermath of the games. It may feel like the games are the focal point of the original trilogy, but they're not. A little alarmed by how much people just want to watch more Hunger Games. There's so much more to be told about this world. That's why I'm really glad that Suzanne clarified that her focus for this next book is going to be about propaganda and how easy it is for the few to rule the many. Per usual, I think she'll use the games as a vessel to tell that story. She really set the stage in what to expect in terms of story structure in the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes.
I feel like when people start this whole dialogue of let's talk about Congo, they never actually talk about Congo because it's the same infographics over and over again that barely provide any information. But the little that I'd say about Congo is, first of all, if you've never heard of that country before, you should know that it is massive. And it's not only massive geographically because there's such a tendency, let's say tendency, to not call it what it is, to minimize African countries, both geographically and in their importance to the world now and before. And DRC, Congo, is not only huge geographically, like it could swallow entire European countries, multiple European countries. It also is huge in terms of global politics, like the impact that Congo has on the world. I'm not exaggerating when I say that the world could not run without Congo. So that's why multiple parties are invested in its exploitation. And when I say parties, I mean politicians, I mean political parties, I mean whole governments, I mean corporations, major corporations, the ones that you see making billions and billions of dollars. That doesn't spawn out of nowhere. They are literally exploiting Congo. They've been choking Congo for decades and decades and decades now, and that's why they're invested in Congo's chaos. That's why they're invested in funding rebel groups. That's why the UN had the longest peacekeeping mission there, I believe. That is all a part of neo-colonialism. So if you're going to do a little bit of education about Congo, that's where I would start. Just read up on it a little bit, and then that's when you're able to see just how important Congo is and just how bad the Congolese people have had to suffer because the land that they live on has been so blessed with literally all the riches in the world.
What's unfortunate, every now and then I come to this realization that I could come up with better talking points and arguments for this man than the Conrad Collective does. And it's sad because that's not my job. I hate Conrad with my whole chest. I think it is a terrible ship. You could never catch me being Team Conrad. And yet, so many of you guys literally set your own man up for failure, and it's funny every time. For example, I was thinking about the firework, the infamous firework, meaning when our boy lit a firework in the sky in the 4th of July episode, and I was going to talk about it because I've been asked to talk about it so many times, and I think it is like a good scene, and I think it's a good example of how a lot of the symbolism in the show is intentionally crafted to be ambiguous because it is a love triangle where you're supposed to pick a side. There's certainly a way to interpret that scene where you can criticize Jeremiah, and even a way where you can make it like Belly and Conrad centric as far as symbolism, but instead of doing that, people go for the Jeremiah is an attempted unaliver and dangerous and violent allegations, and he was sabotaging Belly and Conrad's relationship when they didn't have a relationship and it was inconsequential, and they look stupid every time because they could have actually made like a decent argument using that scene, but not like as good as the one that you could make against it, but they never do. And it's like really funny because they go for things like it's just Belly and Conrad's love story and Jeremiah is the villain and or an obstacle, when like, girl, Jeremiah gets more airtime. Talk about how, oh, look at the social media account, they posted something that says Bonrad or bust, and then like, what do you know, the next day they post like a jelly thing, because it's almost as if it's a love triangle where you're supposed to pick a side and they're going to promote both boys. All this to say that I don't think they're ever as good because they're not supported by action, but there are arguments that you could make for Bonrad and for Conrad in general that you guys are not even making. You're saying obscene, ridiculous, outlandish things that set your man up for failure. And while it could never be as good as my jelly arguments because the material's just not there, he's not a good love interest and it's not a good ship, I almost want to lay them out, but then again, I don't want to give you guys ideas. But man, it is funny watching you all set your fave up for failure, like when your Bonrad math doesn't compute, or you like condemn Jeremiah for something he actually didn't do, something that Conrad has done like 100 times and worse. And when you guys use something like this to talk about how it's so obvious and we're watching the show with our eyes closed and we must be so stupid for not seeing that it's always been Conrad, like you're gonna look stupid every time. The symbolism is intentionally ambiguous so that you can interpret it one way or the other. I promise you all the symbolism is not pointing to Conrad. It's a love triangle, babe, and unfortunately you guys don't even like meet the marks that you could be making for your fave. Like, I could do it better. And it's sad because I'll like see people in my comments and I'm like, I could really argue this point better and I don't even like the man.
Let's talk about the lesbian cinema renaissance that we're in right now, because it's Pride Month and it makes me really happy. Now, in general, queer cinema is like more mainstream now than it's ever been, but the prevalence of lesbian stories specifically is really fucking exciting, especially because a lot of the stories we're getting show a really wide range of the lesbian experience, and a lot of them don't fall into the sadly very common stereotype of the period drama of two sad, lonely lesbians who yearn for each other and love each other very deeply, but because of the confines of their time, they can't act on their urges. Some of those movies are great. They all have their time and place, but lesbians can do more than one thing. Now, lesbian movies in general have been pretty rare, but if you've been really enjoying this recent uptick in lesbian stories, there are some classic lesbian films that I think it's vital to introduce you to. Now, this is in no particular order, but I'm going to talk about one of my favorite rom-coms of all time first, Saving Face, which is written and directed by Alice Wu. This, in my opinion, is the quintessential lesbian rom-com. The story is about two second-generation Chinese-American immigrants living in the Chinese-American community, and they're super gay for each other. They are lesbians. It's incredibly romantic. It is laugh-out-loud funny. And the story is genuinely like If Everything Everywhere All at Once wasn't a multi-dimensional, like surrealist action dramedy, and it was instead just a love story, and it was from Joy's perspective. It's awesome. If you are a girl who likes girls, you have definitely seen Portrait of a Lady on Fire, but have you seen Celine Sciamma's first film, Water Lilies? This movie is a coming-of-age story about having your first crush and the ups and downs that brings. I'm not going to promise a happy ending here, but it is an incredibly beautiful, moving film, and Adele Hanel, who is also in Portrait of a Lady on Fire, is in this, and she is stunningly gorgeous throughout. I love this movie so much. Like all of Celine Sciamma's movies, though, it did shake me to my core, so just be forewarned. Another directorial debut that's crazy impressive: before they made The Matrix, the Wachowskis made Bound, which is a lesbian, like, crime heist, sexy, erotic thriller. It's fucking awesome. Jennifer Tilly plays a mob girlfriend who like immediately falls for Gina Gershon's handyman character that moves into her building after she gets out of prison, because of course she does. And they get entangled into this plot, and it's very sexy and wonderful. It's super, super fun. The Watermelon Woman was the first film to be directed by an out Black lesbian, Cheryl Dunn, who also wrote the film and stars in the film. And it's a really cute rom-com about a woman who works in a video store, and she's, you know, it's her dating life as a lesbian in the 90s, but it's also a story about her passion project to make a documentary about this actress who worked in the 1930s and the early days of filmmaking and played mostly like mammy stereotype characters, and she's credited as only the Watermelon Woman, and it leads her down this like beautiful like path of exploration about the history of Black cinema. This film is really charming and beautiful. It feels like a time capsule of like the 90s in the best possible way, and there's so much to love about it. It's fantastic. And let's end for now with one of the most beloved lesbian films of all time, But I'm a Cheerleader, directed by Jamie Badavid. This film is starring Natasha Lyonne, Clea Duvall, Melanie Lynskey, RuPaul. This film is unbelievably iconic. It's a hyper-stylized, incredibly camp comedy about a cheerleader who gets sent to gay conversion therapy, and it's not nearly as depressing as it sounds. It takes this really serious subject matter and brings a level of levity to it that is really cathartic and really fun. Anyway, happy Pride to all of my fellow gay girl cinephiles, and by the way, my Cinema for Gaza shirt came in, and the links are still in my bio if you're able to donate at all. I'm still fundraising for Abed's family and World Central Kitchen, a bunch more, so. I'm absolutely fascinated by the Deadpool and Wolverine marketing strategy because I have absolutely zero idea how audiences are going to respond to this movie. The last 3 consecutive comic book movies that came out were Madam Web, Aquaman the Lost Kingdom, and The Marvels, and they all did extremely poorly. Admittedly, The Marvels did come out during the actors and writers strike, so the actors couldn't even really properly promote it, but still, this movie, there's a lot of expectation being put on this movie to perform well in the box office, and this is also like a big Marvel, you know, thing, so this is why I'm curious about it, because most of the promotional material that they've released has not been received particularly well on the internet. Like right now on Twitter, there's a whole conversation happening about how like the marketing and a lot of the larger humor of Deadpool is like borderline homophobic because the entire joke is like, what if gay? I think that's kind of a disingenuous reading. As someone who has like been very familiar with Deadpool as a character, I used to read the comics for a long, long time. This is kind of Deadpool shtick, and I think like the joke here is less about like, oh, what if they were gay, but about the fact that Wolverine is very obviously tired of Deadpool's shit, and Deadpool does stuff to annoy him on purpose. That being said, it very much is intentionally juvenile, like frat boy humor, and I don't know if that's like still the kind of humor that audiences really want anymore. And while I do think the general audiences are at least more aware of this movie, as they are most movies, and the last 2 Deadpool movies did really well, and this is exactly the kind of thing that audiences are supposed to want, I am just not really sure how it's going to go over. And I know some people aren't going to like me saying this, but I have had my doubts about this project ever since it was announced that the creative team would be totally different and that Sean Levy would be writing and directing this film, just because he didn't really ever particularly seem like a very good fit for Deadpool to me. And I'm not like a huge fan of Free Guy or The Adam Project or like I wasn't sold on the concept. And then you add to that the fact that Deadpool's entire shtick is like being very self-aware and self-effacing, and having a huge conglomerate like Disney that's also for decades prided itself on being extremely family friendly. You wonder what the limitations of that are going to be, and then also just the fact that it feels like a touch of irony, you know, making jokes at the expense of Daddy Disney. It doesn't really feel like John Oliver poking fun at HBO. He's a real person who has a lot of passion about this. Deadpool is a fabricated character that, you know, has been utilized by capitalism extremely well. So the messaging just feels a little bit hollow, which admittedly is not like a deal breaker for a blockbuster. I will say that the trailers for Deadpool and Wolverine do look really promising. I'm not one who puts a lot of stock in trailers, but they really are selling like the idea of this movie. It's an idea that could come off as very contrived, but it does feel like it could work from the way they're presenting the story right now. And even things like, you know, I love Logan. I loved the send off to that character. You know, the idea of bringing Hugh back, I'm not sure I'm sold on yet, but I mean, it could be very fun, very good. I'm very curious how audiences are going to react to this, because a lot about this film and the way it's being marketed does feel a little bit dated. So I don't know. I'm really curious. Yeah, I think some people are bringing big hater energy, but I also think it's like kind of a little bit warranted. I'm going to remain on the fence for a while. I don't know. But I am just insanely curious how this whole thing is going to shake out, because if this movie doesn't do super well, I have no idea what that could mean for superhero movies. And if it does do super well, is this what is that the lesson? Is that they're going to make more superhero movies like this? Because even if this movie is good, I don't know that should be the takeaway.
Colin Bridgerton and Mr. Darcy are the same person. I know what you're thinking. Jack, no, that's wrong. That's incorrect. You're wrong. Jack, you are wrong as a person. And you can think that all that you want. You're probably going to put it in the comment section. You know what? I don't care, because I realize that Colin Bridgerton and Mr. Darcy are 2 sides of the same coin. And I'm sticking with it, because here's the thing. We have 2 very awkward men. 2 men who the people around them think are very charming, like the people who know them best, love, think are great, whatevs. But they both give off kind of neurodivergent-y vibes. Now, Colin's neurodivergent just has him like self-doubting, has him mirroring whoever is around him who he thinks that he should mirror. He's completely and utterly unsure of himself, to the point that you'd almost think that he's a Bingley, but he's not a Bingley. Benedict is a Bingley, if anyone's going to be a Bingley here, okay? No, Colin is the type of guy who has like this very set list of everything that he's expecting from his life and how he thinks it's supposed to go, and he comes from a much bigger, more loving family, and it doesn't have anybody that he's to care for, so it makes it a little easier for him to like get through things. Colin Bridgerton is Mr. Darcy. If Mr. Darcy had more opportunity to flourish and grow and didn't have to continuously prove himself, even though Colin Bridgerton is continuously trying to prove himself, because Mr. Darcy is always trying to prove himself, and the way that he always tries to prove himself is by being stoic and being still and being steady and like being like, my sister has to be perfect, but I love her anyways, like she can do no wrong even if she does wrong, and I have to be perfect. And I can't do any wrong, because if I do any wrong, it will prove the facade that I have is just a facade, and that I'm continuously faking it. And that's how Mr. Darcy, like, you know, is the entire time. And he's like, no one actually cares about what I think. No one wants to be near me. So he's all grumpy and stoic and gets chased after by Bingley's stupid, slutty sister. And meanwhile, he's just like, no one actually like likes me, but all the while, he assumes that there's like this secret unspoken thing between him and Lizzie Bennet, who hates him. Now, Colin is the opposite of this, okay? He and Penn have this entire thing where like, he's like, yeah, Penn is like my best friend. Penn would never have any interest in me because we've like grown up together, but Penn is like my favorite human being on the entirety of the planet, and I just love her so much, and I'm so glad that we're 2 platonic friends, until he realizes that he's actually madly in love with her. And never, ever does he actually think about like discussing this with her. And you know who else has the same thing? Mr. freaking Darcy, who was like, oh yeah, no, Lizzie and I are like both madly in love with each other. It's actually really crazy how in love with each other Liz. Like, Mr. Darcy is literally like, it is insane how in love Lizzie Bennett and I are. We never discuss it. We never say anything. But, you know, I drop my hints. About how in love we are. And she agrees with me. And Lizzie Bennett all the while is like, dies, motherfucker. I hate you. Rot. And he's like, man, she loves me. I love her. When I propose, she's gonna be so happy. And then she's also, you know, continuously like, I would literally rather eat glass than be near you. You ruined my favorite person's life. So, I'm just saying, Colin and Mr. Darcy are two sides of the same coin, okay? They're both morons. They're both hot, dumb, rich morons who are trying to do right by their family and are just so stupid. Okay, bye. I know that there's a new Hunger Games coming, and I'm very excited that there's a new Hunger Games coming, because I really have been wondering, like, what happened in Haymitch's game. Like, obviously we know how Haymitch won. Obviously we know about, like, Madge's aunt, her dead aunt's, like, whole travesty type of thing. But I want to know more. I want a point of view from Katniss's mother. That's what I want. I want to see Katniss's mom fall in love with... I want to see Katniss's mom fall in love with Katniss's dad. I really, really want more District 12 while Haymitch's games are going on, because there are 4 kids there and I want information. But also, I don't want a new Hunger Games book, because the world is currently a terrible place and it feels like there's already enough Hunger Games in the real world. We don't need it in book form. But if there's one author I trust, it is Suzanne Collins. But mostly I really, really want to know more about Katniss's mom and dad. Even though I will never forgive Katniss. Ever. Penelope Featherington is who Colin Bridgerton is, okay? Every nerdy thing that he has going for him, Penelope has going for her. And when he is around her, that is the one time that the facade of whoever Colin wants to pretend to be comes off, and he starts trying to be the real version of himself. The one person that Colin Bridgerton is comfortable around continuously, always, is Penelope Featherington. Even when she's mad at him, even when she's like pissed at him or ignoring him or trying to tell him something that he's not ready to tell, even when he's performing in front of everyone else in the room, he is being himself around Penelope, and it's beautiful. I don't know why I said that so aggressively, but I also know why I said that so aggressively, and it's because it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my entire life. That boy mirrors every single person that he is around. That boy is a mirror for the people in his life. He does what he thinks other people want him to do. But you know who, I don't know what's on my face right now, but there was something. But you know who he does not mirror around? You know who he's just comfortable to be himself around at all times? Penelope. To the point that he was willing to tell her that he was madly in love with her in a carriage, declaring his love, even though she was about to go and get proposed to by someone else, because he wanted her to know his love for her, and because he knew that she was the one person he could ever truly be happy with. God, I love this show. It's not just audiences. Everyone hates teen girls. If you are a teenage girl, the world is going to treat you like garbage. Not always to your face. Not always to your face. People are going to love you. The people who know you will love you. But the rest of society will tell you that you're wrong, no matter what you're doing. And it's the worst thing and the worst feeling in the entire world, because no matter what you do, you are wrong. If you're too into studying, you're not outgoing enough. If you're too outgoing and you go out partying all the time, you're not being responsible. If you're trying to be responsible and you have an after-school job, then all of a sudden you are just showing that your parents aren't doing the right thing. If you like the Beatles, it's the worst band in the entire world. As soon as a 40-year-old man discovers the Beatles, 10 years later, biggest band to ever exist. Not so in the 1960s, when it was all about the teenage girl fever and they had movies made off of them and the fever that was the teenage girl obsession with the Beatles. But people like to overlook that part. It's not just audiences hating teenage girls in the shows. Teenage girls are a universally hated aspect of life, and it drives me bonkers. Because teenage boys aren't treated the same. Teenage boys will never be treated the same. Teenage boys are given chance after chance after chance, well into their 30s, to mess up as much as they want. Girls are not given the chance to mess up. Because even if everyone around that girl absolutely loves her, the rest of society will expect so much more. They will expect a different result. I don't even know where I'm going with this. It breaks my heart, because I remember being a teenage girl and I was very girly and I was very outgoing and I just wanted to be fun. And now I look back, and even now, even knowing that society doesn't like teenage girls, I feel bad for being annoying when that's the number one thing that you're supposed to do when you're a teenager. You're supposed to mess up your makeup. You're supposed to really go out there with your clothing. You're supposed to find these things that you're passionate about that maybe no one else is passionate about, or maybe everyone else is passionate about them. It doesn't matter so long as you're passionate about it. And people hate that if you're a girl. If you're a girl and other girls like it, it's forbidden.